Hi, welcome to this video on writing PEEs for our controlled assessment. This one is the colour red. So we're looking at making a point evidence explain on the colour red. Okay, here's the discussion topics that my class have looked at. And like I said, we're looking at the colour red and Curley's wife's appearance. So quickly, before we go into point evidence explain, please make sure you don't do this, end up failing. If you just talk about plot, you can't get higher than an E. So please try to take in this video as much as possible and how to do a good PEE. Okay, so a normal PEE is point, evidence, explain. But what we're adding to this to get higher grades is we're adding in zooming in on a word. So that means when we've looked at our quote, zoom in on just a specific word and explain it. And also we want to get context in there. I've said all the way through my lessons, to get a high grade, you've got to talk about context. So you're turning your P into point, evidence, explain, zoom in, context. So this is the quote we're looking at in this video. She had full rouged lips and wide-spaced eyes, heavily made up. Her fingernails were red. Okay, there's my quote. The point I'm going to make is Curley's wife is described as wearing red throughout the novel. Okay, in my point, I'm not going mad. I'm not going to make a big, grand, amazing point. All I'm going to do is make a simple one-sentence point because I'm going to earn my marks with my explanation and my analysis. So make your point really simple. People do tend to go a bit. People do tend to get a bit confused if you write loads in your point. Just make it a short, simple point. In my explanation, I'm basically just going to be talking about what the use of the red means. So I'm going to talk about red and basically talk about the fact it symbolises sex, danger, and it's a warning sign to the reader. So basically the use of the red is a big warning sign, a big alarm to the reader that this person is going to be trouble for George and Lenny, and also she's a sexual character that's going to cause trouble. Then I'm going to zoom in. So what I mean by that is pick out a word in the quote and talk about it in detail. So I think the words I can pick out, or the phrase I can pick out in this quote, are rouged lips, wide spaced eyes, heavily made up, that's separate ones, and her fingernails were red. So I'm then going to do one sentence each talking about them. So for example, I'm going to zoom in on the lips. So obviously red lips is a sexual thing. So I'm going to talk about that. Okay. I'm going to talk about fingernails. Okay. So we have talked about in my class that maybe her fingernails are red. Maybe this could suggest to the audience that by the end of the story, she will have blood on her hands. So foreshadowing death. I'm going to zoom in on the wide space eyes. Again, if you've been in my lessons, we've talked about that. It suggests youth. If someone's got wide space eyes, it's telling the reader that this person is young. And also we're going to zoom in on heavily made up. And there's lots of things you can talk about heavily made up. We could be saying that she's wearing this makeup to be sexual. We could be saying that she's trying to look older. We could be saying that as she's a like 18-year-old girl, she might have acne, she's trying to cover up. Or a high level point could make it, we know that Curley's a violent character, and in the 1930s women did get beaten by their husbands. So maybe we could be saying she's heavily made up to hide a black eye, like this picture might suggest. Also, Steinbeck has used the word heavily to suggest that she's almost like got loads and loads and loads of it on. And then we're going to talk about 1930s America. Well, what could we talk about this? Well, we could talk about the fact that women were ignored if basically they weren't wives or mothers. So maybe this is the why she's trying to get attention. So my point is, which I've talked about, Curley's wife is described as wearing red. My evidence is the quotes. Then I'm going to do my explanation basically talking about what red can symbolise. So the colour red is very sexual and shows Curley's wife is trying to look attractive for the men. It also symbolises danger as a big warning sign for the characters and the reader that Curley's wife will be a dangerous character. That's me explaining the colour red and why it's been used. Then I'm going to zoom in on one sentence on each of the words and phrases that I've already picked out. So, she has worn bright red lipstick to bring attention to her full lips and has painted her fingernails the same colour. This could foreshadow to the reader she will have blood on her hands by the end of the novel and could cause a character's death. So I've done one sentence on the lips, one sentence on the fingernails. Then Steinbeck also brings attention to how young she looked with her wide space eyes. So that's one sentence on wide space eyes. She may be using her heavily applied makeup to make herself look older, or perhaps hide any blemishes a young girl may have on her skin. However, it may be a sign from the writer she's been physically abused by her husband and is hiding a black eye. So I've done a bit more there. However, all I've done is basically just talked about are things here. So heavily made up, sexual, look older, acne, abuse. I've just given a little bit of sentence for each of those things. And then context, what could we talk about? Well, just one sentence. In the 1930s, domestic abuse was very common, and this may be a subtle hint to the reader she's a victim on the ranch and in general as a woman in the 1930s. So I'm saying the fact that Curley might have hit her was common at the time, and also basically shows that she's a victim throughout the novel, and that women were victims a lot of the time in 1930s America because of how they were treated. Okay, so just remember from this video, and that's all as one. So quickly then, just as one, all of that is on one quote. Yeah, so all of that is just from making a point, giving my quote, explaining the colour red, zooming in 2 or 3 times on the quote, and talking about 1930s. So try to get in your head, point, evidence, explain, which I'm sure you've done to death at school. However, if you zoom in on a quote, discuss context, you're going to get a higher grade. Remember, you won't be able to zoom in on 3 or 4 phrases every single quote. You should be able to do one word at least, one context at least for each quote. So that's the end of the video. Hopefully you've got that into your heads. Any problems, drop me an email.